morning, good evening to everyone joining us today. Thank you for joining us to talk a little bit about the next major version of decisions. For today, we're going to just walk through who's going to be talking with us today, or who my fellow speakers. So we're going to give you a quick run through of some of the themes and what's new in V10. We're going to have we're going to talk about some support for vibe coding and our new deployment tower and portal refresh. Heath and Greg are joining me on the call. They're going to provide us some walkthroughs of some of the new capabilities that we're going to discuss. And super excited to get a chance to showcase something that our product engineering teams have been working really, really hard on for the last year. And we're excited to get into our customers' hands this week. We've been thinking about decisions as the type of control layer for the enterprise. I think anyone that has used decisions before understands it has a breadth of capability governing human tasks, automations, AI agents, and in intertwining all of those capabilities together, bringing all those things together in a cohesive and rich design framework that solves lots of different types of problems at scale for all sorts of businesses. And V10 is really the next iteration on that same principle of broad capability and cohesive design. So, we have a there's a we have a there is more in V10 than we could possibly walk through together, um, on this hour. I will say that one of the things we'll be doing is providing a series of detailed trainings. So if you have any information you like about getting up to speed on V10, our training team is, more than willing to walk you through that. We've modernized the core experience of the platform. We've refreshed it. We've made it new. It's fast. It's slick. It looks great, and we think it shows up really well. We have rethought a few of our core design experiences, specifically the statement rule editor. Decisions is rule editing capability. It's business rule engine is core to what we do, and we want the rule engine or the statement rule editor, excuse me, to meet that same capability level. We've done a lot of work in our data and reporting engine to make sure that the data you see at design time is the data that your users see at runtime, so it's even easier to build. And we're really excited to walk you through our deployment tower concept, which really re-envisions how you deploy and test inside of the Decisions platform. So with that, talk a little bit about Decisions version 10. So we've been doing a lot of review in the product team trying to understand what our customers need. And our customers have told us in a resounding fashion they have lots of capability. What they don't need more features and functions. What they need is a more integrated deployment process. And they want to be able to support a variety of different types of technologies. They want something that's more composable, has increased visibility, and allows them to incorporate testing and validation into their deployment process more better. So let's talk about what's new in V10. So there's three main things we're going to talk about here today. Heath is going to walk us through our vibe coded front end support. Um, Greg is going to walk us through a deployment tower. And then while you watch Greg walk through deployment tower, when you watch both of them, actually, you're going to get a feel for the brand new designer experience that we're launching with V10. So, what is our vibe coding support? Vibe coding, obviously, everything Gen AI is all the rage right now, and vibe coding itself is a type of application development pattern that is extremely popular. Now, Decisions, as Heath will show, has always supported custom front ends. We're very flexible on how we deploy as a full stack or a back end only service. And it's always been something that you can do, and a subset of our customers do, which is build a custom React front end. But in the era of agentic software development and vibe coding, we thought we wanted to understand what are the strengths that decisions provide to someone who wants the velocity of doing vibe coding for the front end. And what we've done is provided a way for you to generate a sort of project definition from your decisions project that you can hand off to one of the vibe coding applications, and then use that to generate your front end. And now you keep this tight link between the front end and the back end. And what we think this does is give you all of the benefits of these agentic software development and vibe coding applications where you can build front ends extremely quickly without sacrificing any of the safety of the back end. Nowadays, there's a lot of discussion around the terms probabilistic when referring to Gen AI and deterministic when referring to more traditional forms of automation. And our assertion is that you can have the best of both worlds. You can keep the sort of agentic software development on the front end, where it's fast and more importantly, safe, and then keep the decisions workflow execution, its long duration state management, its data safety and permissions on the back end. And you don't have to give up reliability or deterministic execution on the back end to get the benefits of the front end. What we can do is give you these manifests and allow you to have the best of both worlds. But beyond just what Heath is gonna walk through when he shows the vibe coding capabilities is we are doubling down on all of the AI capabilities in our platform. We're very proud of our AI comment framework. We're continuing to add new capabilities to that, such as the ability to sanitize data before it gets into a large language model, so you have even more control over what gets sent out to large language models, and that's well before the fact that we have since day one been model agnostic. You can pick your model and determine the right model for the right particular workload um, uh, at any moment. We've been adding rich AI agent capabilities to the tool, giving you the ability to support first and third party agentic um, uh, deployments. We want to be able to give you the best, as with our vibe coding example, we want to support multiple types. Build your agents on us, or let us be the function backend through MCP that your agents need to move beyond just simple chat experiences into those sort of digital workers that many in our market see as the future of work. And that takes us to deployment tower. And Heath and I have done a lot of work over the last 12 and 18 months trying to understand what are the things that customers need to deploy more quickly with more confidence. And deployment tower is what that concept is. And the idea here, which you'll see in Greg's walkthrough, is that I can track the work from my system of record, my Jira, my Azure DevOps, whatever that system of record is, into decisions. And then I can use that, I can assign that work and I can see how that work gets bundled up into packages that then get deployed into production. And then decisions with its sort of rich event triggering capability, can make simple calls back into that system of record. So I can avoid having to make a change and then swivel chair back into Jira to modify the state of that particular task or that story. And it gives you the ability to now see the lineage of a request as it moves from backlog to a sprint to in development and decisions to in production. And that's before you even get to the rich capabilities in terms of automated testing, manual review, as well as integrated UAT testing that Greg's going to show you about. He's going to show you there's a huge amount of enhancements and improvements to the core deployment process that we're calling deployment tower, and we are very, very, very excited about that. And as you'll see in both of my coworkers' demos, the entire front end experience of the application is entirely different. If for those current customers, if you want to see what it looks like right now, log on to support.decisions.com and log into your customer portal. You'll be able to see firsthand what the portal experience looks like. We've re-envisioned the statement rule editor and refreshed the entire portal. We think it shows better for our designers as well as our end users. And we're really excited for everyone to get their hands on this sleek and more important, more performant new portal experience. With all of those capabilities, our customers have the ability now to build quicker, and have more confidence in what they deploy. We were looking for a tagline to try to understand the sort of value proposition, and it's trusted deployments deployed more quickly. We've always had a rich set of capabilities. You can build effectively anything in decisions. But there were moments where you needed to integrate with a third-party CI/CD tool, or you needed some more automated testing, and we've solved all of those problems with our deployment tower concepts. Just like with vibe coding, where our customers who wanted that per pixel perfect support that front end frameworks like React provide had to manage these sort of two different code repos. We've solved that problem with a shared deployment and project management concept in our vibe coded front end capability. With that, I'm going to ask my coworker and friend and our CTO, Heath Oderman, to take over and walk us through a little bit of the vibe coded front end experience that I've been talking about for the last few minutes.
There's uh with decisions, there's a couple of things I want to be clear on what this new capability is and what it is not. And what it is not a vibe coding tool or an AI code assistant built into decisions that allows you to build a custom user interface for a workflow or a business process that you've created or a business rule set that you have that's important to you. We do have a partner that specializes in that specific offering and feature offering. Feel free to contact us about that, and we'd be happy to connect you with them if you're looking for something that is fully built in. Decisions has always supported the idea that some projects, some processes in a business need to be contained fully within decisions, and that some processes, decision needs to provide some of that business capability that you've come to rely on it for, the authentication, the logging, the exception management, user tasking, deadline enforcement, like dynamic notification processes, but you want a custom user interface. So we've always had an incredibly rich web service layer that allows you to programmatically interact with the entirety of the back end and therefore make great use of it from a custom user interface. In fact, I was looking through documents on my laptop before the webinar today and found a document from 14 years ago where we put together a document instructing a customer how to build their own version of the truth table editor to use the truth table backend. So we have a rich history of supporting custom front ends. What we wanted to do, though, is give people a way to use the kind of quick and really easy to develop with tools that are becoming so popular and for obvious reasons, but with the back end of decisions enforced in a way that makes it really simple for them to get started, but have a completely managed back end for their purpose built front end. I'm gonna take you through that really quickly here on my laptop. We're gonna go all the way through the process. I'm gonna create a new um, uh, project here in V9. This is gonna be for my finance and admin workflows and I've got to give it an icon now. You're going to see a number of hints around like what Will was talking about with deployment tower, the things that we've done to improve the deployment experience and the kind of developer experience. You'll see hints of things on my screen, like at the top right, you see pick user story, and on the bottom right, you see sprints. We've got integration now with a lot of PMIS systems that automatically group and kind of bundle all of your work together to allow it to be deployed. When you come into decisions, we have a huge advantage over a lot of people who are entering this space or who are competing in this space in that we have an incredibly comprehensive workflow and business rule management system. Deterministic rules have always been academically a part of the artificial intelligence landscape. And so having human in the loop management, workflow tasking, process automation, deterministic rule engine with all kinds of rule design experiences, we've always had this incredibly rich capability around moving work through an organization, tasking people in the right ways, automatically reaching determinations about whether or not data should or shouldn't be worked, can be automatically disposed, can be processed immediately. That's just who we've always been. And so, layering on a lot of these AI features that Will is talking about in the early part of this presentation and that Greg is going to show you in more detail, for us, it's simple because we have that rich back end that's always been able to kind of hold these pieces together. So I'm going to go do normal decisions things. I'm in a project now. It's my finance and admin project. And I would like to create a new case type. Cases are commonly managed things that have life cycle and may or may not have workflow and custom user interfaces around them or forms built in our form designer around them. And we're going to call this, we want a new invoicing process. So an invoice is going to have a vendor name and it's going to have a total amount and I'm not going to bore you guys with the details of setting up a more comprehensive data type than this, but I've just created a case. Now, we know in decisions, as soon as we have a case, we can start to interact with these things. I'm going to create a folder in my project. I'm going to call it all invoices. And I'm going to go to the all invoices folder. And I should be able to, as a designer user, immediately go create a new invoice. So I'm going to call this the CDW request for Zoom. We want to use Zoom. It's going to cost us a few bucks a seat. So we'll say it's going to be about 4,000 a year. And the vendor name is Zoom. So I've got a case. I can start managing that case. Now we know we can build workflows around this, notifications, alerts, tasking. Uh, but from a basic standpoint, I now have an entity with lifecycle that lives inside decisions. I'm going to go just a little bit further before I jump over to the new piece of decisions. This is just standard decisions. I'm going to create a flow, and this flow might be used to process an invoice with AI. And this flow would take in, maybe it would take in an invoice document and it would send it to a large language model for text extraction or use our smart extract tool. In this case, I'll just take a vendor name in as input and I would start to now build out a flow in the normal decisions way. I would call subflows. I would interact with databases. I would call out to integrations, call REST services. I could use agents and MCP tools here if I want to, but this is just a decisions workflow. And in decisions, every flow, every rule, every report that you build in decisions can become part of an external API. We've moved API integration over here to the left-hand side and brought these things together a little better. So I have an element slug here for this particular flow. It says process invoice with AI. That's the name of my flow over the API boundary. I'm just going to hit save. And now I have a case data type and I have a flow which are available to be used outside decisions. In Decisions V9, even V8, all the way back to V6, you've now had the ability to go and interact with your project, although it's a little easier to see it here from the V9 and V10 REST service view. I can see my flow. I can see that it's available to be called. And now I could go and use something like Codex and build a custom front end calling these flows. But what we've added in decisions is this idea of custom web apps. So now custom web apps are a natural part of your project. And to help you get started, we will spit out a scaffolding of a React Vite project for you to use outside decisions in something like Visual Studio Code. Or use an AI coding assistant if you want to. You don't have to. You can just hand code a custom user interface. But you name this application, and I'm going to call it invoice processing, and I'm going to give it a URL invoices. And I can see dynamically that we expect that this custom web application will be hosted entirely inside the decisions runtime. That means it's going to be able to share things like authentication or single sign-on with your SAML provider absolutely seamlessly without you having to implement any of that in your code. We've got some simple instructions here. We can indicate which case types we want to allow our project to interact with. And then we hit save and we download our new project template. So I'm going to pop it open here and you'll see I've got a new invoicing project and it looks like a run of the mill React Vite project. I'm going to go ahead and open Visual Studio Code here, get to a terminal window. So I'm going to go into my downloads folder and I'm going to go into my invoice processing folder, which is brand new. I'm just going to right off the bat run npm install to get all the node packages that support this skeleton, and that's going to pull down things like you would expect: React Router, a couple of things like that. Then let's open Visual Studio Code. What's cool about the template project that we spit out is you'll see it's got some simple management for authentication, right? And it's got some simple management right out of the box for any of the data types defined on the decision side. In this case, I have a case. It's called an invoice. So that invoice is spit out for me here in a TypeScript file. So it's easy for me to interact with in a safe way. And this is really the cool part, is that we build an API client for you. Now, you can get this like I did by downloading the project from in the decisions portal, but we also have an MCP tool, and that allows you to evolve the API client with a coding agent as you go. As you go and you make changes in decisions, you add properties to the invoice, you add new case types to the project. You can have the API client evolve without having to go back and start from first principles. But what you're going to notice in this API client is, because an invoice is a case, I have methods in the API automatically to get all the invoices, to get invoices by ID, to save or create them, to update properties. And you'll also see as I go back up here and find it, I also have methods to call every flow, every rule, and every report that is exposed over the API boundary. So without making any edits to this project at all manually, uh, its decisions has also given me uh, in my skeleton the ability to run this project locally while proxying those requests over to decisions so that I can see it work. So the skeleton by default has an inbox. The inbox doesn't load anything. There's no it hasn't been wired up yet, but you'll see authentication is wired up. Because I'm logged into decisions as Heath at decisions.com, it knows who I am and it's given me the ability to log out if I want to. So what you would do next, now that you have this framework and now that you have a fully running skeleton, and Decisions has an expectation that there's a custom web app on the other side. If I click over here to my custom web apps tab, you'll see invoice processing exists, but this project, my finance admin project, including this custom web app, are not yet deployed. So I come back over here into my terminal. We at Decisions on the engineering team, we've been using Claude Code. So I would launch Claude. I would tell it I trust this folder, and I might ask it to do something. I'm going to say, make the inbox a list of invoices. If any invoice is older than 30, 30 days, make it blink red. I'm just going to give it some stupid instructions. And it's gonna study that React project. It has got some README files built into the skeleton and the framework that help it understand what it should and shouldn't do with some of the TypeScript files, what it should and shouldn't do with some of the API files. And it's gonna go wire that inbox up for me without me having to give it really any more direction than that. Of course, if I want to spend a lot more time with the application, I can get into a lot of the details. I can create very clear instructions for Claude, and I can have it build a very comprehensive application. Once it's done, we can run a test. We'll run a build, which will render all the assets. And then we can take those rendered assets. We can upload them into the custom web app, which is sitting in my browser screen behind this terminal window. And then I can deploy it. So we'll just use custom long description. I would normally have told it to find another date field on that data type, but I want to demo and move quickly for you guys at the same time. And it's gonna take a minute here to rewrite the inbox. So it's almost done. We'll tell it not to test. Let's see here. That looks like it wants to run compile and make sure the code that it wrote compiled. So we'll let it do that. And it says it's done. Great. So we'll exit. We'll run the local version to make sure it works. And now when I run my project, there it is. It got the Zoom case that I made in decisions as a element when I first started my project. I see the amount of the invoice, I see the invoice date. I can search for my invoices. Let me find anything that has groove. Nope, there's nothing. Zoom, okay, it's good. And so now you just build the way you would normally build. There's nothing unique about this part. When you're done, you run a production or a dev build, and that, of course, is gonna give you a dist folder like any other normal, NPM project. I'm gonna zip all that into my project.zip. Okay. Open that folder so I can find my project.zip. I'm gonna go back into decisions. And at this point now I can upload a distribution. It's gonna be in, let's see, downloads, invoice, dist, my project.zip. It's staged for deployment. I can deploy it. If there's a cluster involved, it deploys it to all the nodes of the cluster. If I move my project through the deployment tower to a UAT or a production environment, the custom web app is deployed as a natural part of the project. So our goal here really has just been to take things that we have always done well and make it a lot easier for you to augment that environment using the modern tool set that's available to developers.
Yeah, thanks, Heath. That's great. And Greg, we'll go ahead and pass over to Greg to start walking through the deployment tower. But I think the themes here, like Heath was saying, are kind of the same thing. It's like, what are the things that you would have to do that aren't the core work of actually sort of vibe coding the application or deploying the project constants? What are the, object definitions, the sort of flow execution pieces, the deployment pieces? What are the things that you might have been required to focus on in the past? How can we handle all of that day to day normal kind of work and let you focus on the thing that you need to do, which is really building value for your business or for your customers, building the UI, building the rules, building the workflows, and not have to focus as much or at all on on the actual sort of infrastructure and deployment piece. Greg, are you gonna go ahead and get your,
Yes,
screen share going?
indeed. Just didn't want to interrupt you there.
Okay.
All right. Hey, everyone. We're going to be talking a little bit more to the side of trying to go from start to finish when it comes to deployments using the new deployment tower paradigm within decisions. And we're going to start by just showing you again this revitalized theme for all of what you're going to be working inside the platform. It's going to be making these new features that you're going to be accessing and working with a lot easier and more intuitive to be able to walk through. And speaking of these features, we're first going to get into this release management tab, which is going to be brand new if you're going to be going to V10. This is going to be where you're going to be managing your user stories, your sprints inside of your development server. The deployment server will act as a central management tool, and we'll get to why and how that works in a moment. But right now, I just want to show you that when you are going to start pushing code, pushing your entities from your development environment to your higher environment, you're going to want to start over here. You're going to have your user stories that are going to be assigned to these people to work that are going to be synced with that work inside of your Jira or other PMIS integration that you're importing these from. Now, the way that you set up that integration is all you got to do is come over to your deployment server, and we'll come back to this server later. And you're going to create that connection here. It's a pretty straightforward one. That connection gets pushed out to your other environments to ensure that you have that same consistency of where you're pulling and tracking those systems from in dev, how it's got pushed to QA and tested. So when you get that information back into Jira, you're able to have that tracked accurately. Right. So going back to our dev server right now, I've already imported a few of these, and we're going to start by actually starting work on one of these. In order to start putting your user stories into your higher environment, to start committing changes, you got to make sure it's assigned to someone, and then that person can get working on it. So I'm actually going to assign it to um, Gregory here. We're going to pick that. And then this should allow us to be able to start this work as this user. All right. So This user now has the ability to start work. Now, something I'm going to mention a little bit later and we'll get into partially is there are going to be different user roles. This is a new thing inside of the deployment tower that is going to allow you to better permission and regulate which users are going to have which permissions for this process you're setting up. So I'm going to be constantly kind of switching hats as we're going along. Right now, I'm in developer mode. I'm a developer. I have access to this project and I want to make sure that I get the right commits that I need to into this user story for this compliance rule retirement and deactivation. So the first thing I'm going to come over here is I'm going to make sure that what I want to build is associated with this user story. We'll start with the rules. So I'm going to create a rule over here, and this is going to be I'll just call it our approval rule. We're going to create that real quick. Notice our updated rule designer. I'm going to spend a few moments on this because it is kind of important to understand how this functions and see some of the new features. So, this new UI layout you're given are going to be your variables that you're setting up for this rule to work with. All right. And you're going to have two primary variables here that we're going to be showing. We're going to have a total balance. This will be a decimal. I'm actually going to remove the space from that. And then we are going to have a total limit that will also be a decimal. All right. So just like before, you're going to set up these things in the brand new UI design rule designer. We'll go over some of the new features in a moment. But first, we got to make sure that we have declared variables that are pulled from the updated formula designer. So what we're going to do for that is we're going to have the ability to specify our output like you could in the formula designer. You'll be able to build this directly inside the rule designer to make sure that you can have calculated variables that can change in your rule given what inputs you have already. This ensures that you don't have to do all of those calculations inside of the flow and create extra flow data for additional functionality that you may not need, right? This way, you can actually have your variables concentrated, more organized, and be able to calculate them on the fly. So in this case, our output is going to be the utilization. Pardon me. All right. And then this is going to be a simple one here. We're just going to take our total balance, and we are going to divide that by our total limit. And then we'll just multiply it by 100 to make sure that we get into a percentage, right? And then you have the ability to test this inside the debugger automatically. We'll set a total balance, let's say 5,000. We'll set our total limit to 500. We run that, we'll get our output of 10, right? So divide that times 100, we get 1,000 total. All right. Okay, so I'm going to save that. That gives us our variable over here. Notice this screen when I'm saving something. This is important for all these designer entities. In addition to having the ability to associate user stories inside of the info level at the project and inside of the designer folders, you can also make sure that they are designated at design time to those user stories. Now, notice I can pick from some user stories that I haven't started work on yet. If I do that, I'm going to get notified that I'm putting this into a state that is going to start the work on the story. This ensures that you aren't pushing user stories into other stories that you don't intend to, or there's any mismatch between states of why is someone working on this and it's showing is not in development, right? That gets updated automatically to ensure consistency in the design process. Now I'm going to go to the one that I've actually started. We're going to save that. We're going to save this, exit out. And now we're going to set up our quick rule over here. And all we're going to check is that utilization. And we're going to make sure that it is less than 25. That's going to be our rule that we're running over here. Now, here's a pretty nifty feature. I have the ability to select a default sample set that will run against this rule to test its functionality. We're going to be pulling from a report. I'll show you that report real quick so you guys can all see that. We're going to be pulling from this report right here. It's going to have a list of total limits and total balances. And then we can pass it in directly into our approval rule over here as a sample set. And that's going to automatically run our rule showing us how many results are true, how many results are false with this given run. So it's a way to automatically test this with this data that you can source from a report, which means you can source it from honestly a whole bunch of places, right? Integrations, local database, external database, even running a flow to source the report. You have a whole bunch of different options here. All right. So now that this is associated with our user story, I am going to commit the changes real quick. I will go into our release management over here. I'm going to right click this user. We're going to commit these changes. Now, I want to make something clear here. Commit is not the same as ready to go. All right. Commit means that this is in a state where a reviewer, once this is marked as ready for review, can come in and see all the entities we've associated with it. It pushes it into the deployment server or to the deployment tower, but it does not allow for any packages to go to higher environments on any user stories that are not marked as approved. So this ensures that you have that crucial review step in between. All right. So I'm going to say that this is going to be our approval rule. This is our utilization. Push rules. I'm going to commit this. This will be pretty quick here. And now I'm going to go back and I'm going to show you something with the pages. We're going to make one more commit before we transition to the next part of this demo. And it's important that I show you this. So let's go and make a page. This is just going to be our sample page. And what I want to show you is the new functionality of this page designer. It's a what you see is what you get designer. And this has been updated so that you get to see live data as you are in the design phase of your entity. So the moment I pick that same report that we ran earlier, you're going to see all that data show up. You're not going to just have the default logo of showing what it could look like here, right? Or trying to see the preview for the simple tiles. This will automatically display at runtime and it is not just, or sorry, at design time. It is not just for this control right here. You can have much more complex pages over here that's going to display that for your simple tiles, for your other charts and bar charts over here. So you have the ability to see all of this live. All right. With that being said, I'm going to go over here. Let's make sure that we save, add it to that same user story. We're going to make one more commit and then we're going to make a push. All right. So let's exit out of this. And then we're going to go over to our release management over here, commit our changes, right? We should just have, yep, the page over here, the sample page. And then we're going to add that, add page. And I'm going to mark this as ready for review. That means that I am now shifting hats. I'm going over as a project review person now. I have the ability to go in. I can see this over here. I'm going to see that the moment that I refresh this, it is pending review. So this pending review means that as that project manager, I can look at this user story. I can see the commits. I have the ability to review all of these entities that are pushed in it, see their health score. I can compare it to different versions of this entity. I have the ability to check dependencies to the entities that I'm looking at. And I get to view this commit history as well. So once this is all sorted through and I look at it, I can say, all right, this is fine. I'm going to approve it. If I don't have time to request a change and go back, but if you request a change, it's going to put it back into an in development state and it will display any comments made by the reviewer to the developer for them to follow in making those updates. All right. So before I approve this, I want to show you what this looks like inside of the deployment tower here. So if I go back over here to folders, projects, here's our deploy demo, right? I get to see this pending user story. It is not complete yet. That's why it's listed in this way. If I go back over here and then I'm going to mark this as approved, we should see that update possibly after a quick refresh as well, and it's going to automatically sync that change. You can add this to a package before it's approved, but you can't push that package anywhere else. And that's a good movement into our next thing here, which is deployments. All right. So deployments are going to work through deployment packages. Deployment packages contain the entities that go to your higher environment, and these are versioned on what we call builds. So if I go into this deployment package, we are going to see every different build that has been run against this set of deployments that I am pushing towards it. There are the unit tests in development. There are remote unit tests that get run against them, and these can be run automatically. And then there are UAT results. UAT results allow you to have an additional layer of functionality in a higher environment for user manual testing. This is very similar to an assignment that gets put to a QA person to be able to run that particular UAT test. So I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. But notice that there are multiple builds here. That's the first thing I want to call your attention to. Anytime that you add a user story, remove a user story, update user stories, those builds get incremented automatically, and you get to run unique tests against each build of that particular package. So you have the insight into what particular changes are made, what conflicts there might be, the passing or not passing of the UAT results for that particular package. And you'll be able to view all that right here on a quick dashboard on this build. All right. So going into our QA server right here, you're going to see some UAT results that are ready to go. I can deploy this to QA. I've actually already deployed it to the QA server. So give me a moment while I pull that up. Here's our QA server. You can see it noted in the top right over here. Every server is going to have its little notation so you understand which server we're in as we go along. And we're going to have these three user tests right over here. So these are going to give descriptions of what needs to be verified and tested. First, let's make sure it's assigned to myself so I can actually see that information. I'm going to pick that. I'll assign it. And now, if I go over here, I can open this test case. I can view exactly what it needs me to do, make sure that it complies with WCAG 2.0 AAA standards, right? I can see the test steps necessary. I can see any comments listed on this, the testing status on this. And I have the ability as the QA person to set that test status, right? So the test execution, I go over here, I say, this passed, this failed, this isn't applicable for whatever this project is that we push to a higher environment, and I get to pass my own comments on this over here. Passed, looks great. We're going to save that real quick. And then if I go back into my deployment server over here, let's make sure that we can see that on this build that just got updated, we can see one of three have passed, right? So this will get pushed automatically and updated automatically as your QA team is working on reviewing these tests that you have set up from the deployment tower. Your deployment tower is your centralization for all of this. Your deployment tower is the way that you control this functionality, ensure the QA tests go out appropriately, ensure user stories are assigned to the correct package and tested correctly. This is going to be your central environment for orchestrating all of your processes and deployments in the decisions environment. And then once you've orchestrated all, once you've set it all up, you're going to make sure that your deployment package is marked as ready. Oh, I probably have one that is linked to user stories is not approved. Yep. I've got one in here that is not approved yet. That's that test case that I was talking about, where you got to make sure that all the user stories are approved that are assigned to a package before you can actually mark it as ready. And once it is, you can send it to production. So, with that being said, I think I'm going to pass it back to Will now, unless there are any other questions we have on this.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I mean, obviously, that was a very deployment tower's got a ton of changes and enhancements, and that was a very quick walkthrough. So we do recommend getting with your customer success managers or support and understanding and getting on some of these training events that we'll send some information out about. A couple things Greg didn't touch on really are like the ability to schedule deployments now. You can proactively schedule deployments, and as he was showing, you have a ton of ability to auto deploy contents into your non-production servers. So you run your unit tests on dev, auto deploy to your test server, running your unit tests there. You pair that with the ability to manually review things and the ability to enforce UAT from your business users. Altogether gives you a much more robust um, capability to safely deploy things with all of the visibility enhancements that we talked about. There's a QA thing. Bear with me just a minute here. Q&A. Here we go. With teams in multiple time zones, we often have multiple developers updating dependent flows. Do any of the features of the deployment tower address that particular thorny issue? Uh, so the question for that question, it gives you the ability to see if a flow is associated with multiple stories. There's a tag concept in the portal, and you can visually identify when a flow has been edited by multiple stories. You can see in Greg's example that on that user stories column, you see DEPL. If there was other stories, like if the 04 story was on one of those, then you'd be able to quickly identify that this flow is used by multiple stories. It doesn't change anything about the fundamental manner in which a shared development environment functions, but it does allow you to easily identify if a particular designer element has sort of cross story dependencies. And we'll be working on some enhancements to enforce co-deploying in the early versions of 10. Here's another question. The deployment tower then requires a specific tie into a PMIS system. Can it run independently without a PMIS system? What if I do not want Jira DevOps, but I still want this deployment process available? You absolutely do not. We do not require that you use a PMS system. Um, you can create stories and sprints manually in our dialogue, like Greg is showing. You can create them from generic CSV imports so that you can do them in bulk. Our assumption is most of our users are going to be using Jira or ADO or alike, but there is no requirement that you have to use a third party system here. Uh, so you can manage all of these capabilities without needing a third party system. I have a question here related. Do you only integrate with Jira or other PMIS tools? Right, we're shipping with Jira and ADO and the ability to import via CSV. And we'll be looking at additional systems like Rocket Lane and other service delivery tracking platforms in the near future. And as per my answer to the previous question, you can just create your own stories and sprints manually in the product if needed. There's no requirement that you use a third party system. We will share the recording of this after the fact. We've got a question about when it's going to be released. It is slated for release tomorrow. How does V10 support testing changes? As we showed, there's a variety of testing types available. You can enforce unit test pass on commit. You can auto deploy to your test server and execute your tests there. To sort of one of the questions about, this is one of the best ways that we've found to track these sort of tricky dependencies where you don't know that someone has added a subflow to your flow that has a dependency. Right now, if you run those tests on dev, it'll pass. If that story gets deployed without that subflow to test, it will fail. You will get alerted of the failure immediately, and now you've uncovered that you've got a dependency that you need to manage. And so we think this auto deploy to test and immediate on commit is the solution to a majority of the dependency tracking problems. Uh, Here's a question about integrating chat prompt into decisions. Yes, we have a chat control shipping with V10 so that you can point chat at an agent and let the agent functionality in terms of its system prompts and its tools as well as its agent to agent setup to manage that chat experience for you. Are there rollback capabilities within the deployment tower? If version X was deployed, but it needs to be backed out. Yes, absolutely. You can roll back from any deployment package to another deployment package. One of the things that might have been glossed over here is a deployment package is every project on a server. The era of having the cost of making large projects into sub projects so that we more elegantly track their particular sort of logical separation, and then incurring the cost of multiple deployments no longer exists. You deploy all your projects at once so you can maintain that per project, per sort of feature function capability without incurring any kind of like overhead in terms of deployment. Scheduled deployment, are there any restarts needed? and you get notice of deployment success and failure. There are no requirements for restarting, and you do get alerted on deployment success and deployment failure from the deployment server when you have it configured that way. Here we go. When deploying between different environments, is it all done within the tool, or is there a way that we can capture a set of artifacts to pass off to the operations team? The proximate use case is that developers not have the ability to deploy to higher environments. I think in this world, Jeff, it's one way to think about this is you can only allow your operations teams access to the deployment capabilities in the deployment tower. And so you can create that division of roles that doesn't necessarily is not as clean as that inside of decisions. Um, you can also always just get zip files of the exports. There's no the actual structure of the export object is the same here. It's still a zip file. So if your deployment SOP requires you to export a project as a zip, now it's a deployment package as a zip. That's still a supported feature. But you have more flexibility in terms of how you permiss access to the deployment tower so that developers cannot have deployment capabilities, but your operations team can. That was a core tenet of our work on deployment tower. Are there changes to roles/groups defined for control tower? How does each role or group contribute to an overall CI/CD pipeline? The biggest change is that all the roles and the major roles are and the user association to the environments is all managed through the deployment server now. So instead of having to manage users per environment, you can create a user once and sync them down with specific roles to the particular environments now from a single place. Right now, the new roles that we've added are reviewer, so that you can have someone who's not the developer, and you can enforce manual review prior to deployment at a story level. And you can do that per project. So you can have flexible config. So for a maybe less mission critical project or for a smaller team that doesn't require it, you could not require manual review. For larger teams or when the business context or the risk profile requires it, you can enforce manual reviews. You have that configuration as an admin in the tool. I missed a question. Sorry, scheduled deployment. No, I answered the scheduled deployment question. Apologies. Are the deployment server a new server, or can it be the same as the current repo server? The deployment tower is intended to replace your repo server. You will, as a function of the v10, effectively reinstall your repo server, and then convert to the deployment server or deployment tower, excuse me, and then deprecate your repository server. It is a replacement for the repo server. It is not an additional server in addition to the repo. And sort of implicit in everything that Greg has been showing you, which is mostly about deployment, is a rewritten, much more performant and capable version control backend. We've rewritten the entirety of the repo backend, um, and then layered on all of these testing capabilities on top of it. We currently only have a production and development server and do not have a repo server. Will we need a license to a third server to make use of this new paradigm? Yes, you would have to have an existing license to a repo server, which then gets converted to this new concept to take advantage of this. I can't overstate how you can still deploy as you would today using zip files. I don't know that I could overemphasize or emphasize too much how much these testing patterns are helping our beta customers deploy and track like large project work so much more easily. What happens to existing projects in the old repo? Joe, there's a utility that you run. You can then convert your projects project by project. You basically select up the sort of source branch. That source branch gets converted into a new project structure. Once that's done, you deprecate the repo itself. All of the contents would come over. So the repo just runs it has its own database. You could cold store that repo server if you need be um, at some point, but it would no longer be required for normal function. If we make a change to security, does this automatically flow to UAT or prod? Yes, the user associations are delinked from the deployments. So if you revoke access, let's say like for some reason I have to revoke Greg's access as designer, that will automatically propagate across all of the environments. It does not require you to deploy a project. There's this distinction between the roles in the actual groups themselves for the project. But if you're looking to revoke everyone's access to all servers by revoking like end user and anything more like any permissions above that, you could do that um, automatically across your entire environment through the deployment server. Are there any major deprecations from V9? There are no major deprecations from V9. Most of the deprecations are that we've made over the last 12 to 24 months are already in V9, so you would know about them if there were any. When we keep that on our release site, we keep the breaking changes list to try to keep you as up to date about that as possible. As always, we work really hard to maintain backwards compatibility for all the objects. Got time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions if anyone has anything. I appreciate all the questions. It's wonderful to not speak into the void. How long does the repo conversion take on large projects? So if we think about a large project is say like north of 5,000 items, it takes about, I think somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes to execute. Most projects being below that should be done in a minute or 2. Do the decisions hosted web apps support authentication layers that are decisions account aware? Yes, all of the authentication. What Heath showed you is a front end application that is fully managed by the decisions authentication system. You do not have to separately manage authentication to deploy those web applications to production and make use of the existing user and group associations. When can we Greg, you can help me with this. When can we
Mhm.
anticipate V10 being, available in our online training?
Um, I'm planning to be putting out actually a live training on this soon that you'll be able to register for. I'll make sure that I have that PDF sent out and you guys can register and learn all about the deployment server and its features. And then after we've conducted those live trainings, our plan is to get them into an asynchronous format if you wish to follow along afterward.
And when are we converting the self-paced training to V10, sir?
That would let's see. I want to say it would be I think the goal is early to mid-August, but I don't have a
Okay, great. Is V10 available for existing clients to upgrade to? Yes, absolutely. Anyone who has a decisions repo license, if your license allows a repo, you have access to Deployment Tower. All right, with that, I think it takes us to the end of our time. Please feel free to reach out to your customer success manager with any and all questions about B10, and we'll be following up as well with some information about the training classes that we will have available for everyone. So, it'll be a series of classes over the next couple weeks, and we'll record all of those and make those available in our LMS or on YouTube. I appreciate the time, everyone. Hopefully, everyone's excited about the new capabilities and the new fit and finish on V10. The team's done a ton of work in support of sort of the quality of life and sort of delivery efficiency needs that we've been talking about. So hope everyone enjoys it. I appreciate the time today and thanks everyone. Have a great afternoon.